I haven't connected my iCloud to my phone. I mean, I definitely get text messages on every device, every Mac device that I own.
So text messages can be tied to multiple accounts. What I found is my text messages go hither and yon randomly depending on which of the two iCloud accounts it hits.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because I had like one of the old school back in the days of iPods accounts before iCloud was a thing. And
Right.
then I ended up with an Apple account, and
Mm-hmm.
so now I have to log into both on everything because music
Mm.
purchased long ago. Um, but yeah, I don't know what I did other than enable FaceTime and log into iCloud on my phone,
Hmm.
but every device will ring when I get a phone call. And I'm not talking a FaceTime.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just
Huh.
like any random phone call will ring everything. Everything. It's
Hmm.
traumatizing
So
periodically.
maybe I'll try that. I mean, I've got my SIM card in my Google phone in my
Mm-hmm.
Pixel, but I'll try. But I haven't got anything connected to my iCloud account because I don't use iCloud. Um, so I will. But it doesn't work for Carla, and she has an iCloud account, but I don't know.
Well,
Anyway,
it may be the fact that it's on an iPhone, because I know there's a lot of magical communication that goes on
mm-hmm.
between all my different devices.
Yeah,
So like I can be in my home office, which has an iHome in it that can control various lights,
yeah,
and I'll have my phone and my computer,
yeah.
and I can say, "Hey Siri, turn off the lights," and it only turns off that room if the iHome nabs it.
Hmm.
But if I say the exact same phrase to the phone specifically, it turns the entire house off.
Okay.
And so it can magically tell phone is
Hmm.
in the same room as iHome. iHome should be the one
I,
that
I
responds.
think so the conversation has happened. Like I got a phone call just moments before we started, and of course I can't receive phone calls in my house because why should I do that? What makes me think that I get to pay $70 a month for a phone, and the one thing, well, the many things that it doesn't do, but one key thing is that it doesn't allow me to send and receive phone calls. I have to go outside, find the highest place that I can, and maybe I can receive a phone call at that point. So it's that's frustrating. And so then and then
Yeah.
like, so I turned on Wi-Fi calling. Except sometimes Wi-Fi calling doesn't turn on, and sometimes it does, and sometimes it forgets that I turned on Wi-Fi calling. How hard
And
is this? Come
and
on.
and and I was talking about how like my phone is a fairly useless device except for reading emails and looking at Twitter.
Hmm.
Because like water pipes and things, we have terrible cell signal in our house,
Yeah,
and the phone isn't happy over Wi-Fi in most of
yeah,
the places in the house I am. But my computer's all ran, and my watch. My watch actually can answer the phone
yeah,
better than my phone can answer the phone.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so I used to have just a regular landline. It worked like a charm. And now, going into the virtual future, so I'm tempted to go for one of those voice over IP. You can buy these boxes, and then it's like a
yeah.
flat fee, yearly fee to get a few additional features. And I may go that route because it's ridiculous. And like I can't, if I'm going to try to make phone calls or receive phone calls, I can't. So it's madness, nonsense. Anyway, hi everybody. Welcome to Astronomy Cast. Now that you've all had a chance to say hello, I'm going to say hi to a bunch of people. Hi to Beth Johnson, Bora Clankar, Briastro, Cherry, Coriest, Dwayne Duval, Fernando Salazar, Gordon Dewis, Green W, Grip Taylor, Guido Bieber, Hal McKinney, Ian Farquharan, John Suffield, Larry Beckham, Larry King, Linda Sadiq, Michael Palling, Paul Disney, Paul Gracie, Rich Wilson, Robert Shaw, Susan Hunter, Tesla Ranger, and Zap Van Zap. And hey, everybody. There you go. Uma. Okay, sure. I'll check out Uma. So I built a swallow box.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because there's some swallows are coming by and checking out the house, and they were like landing on things and peeking around and looking in
Yeah.
nooks and crannies. And I'm like, okay, swallow, fine. So I whipped together a swallow box, deployed it, And not only, and then this morning I was sort of checking on it, not only were there swallows set up in the box, there was two couples fighting over the box. So there's just like, and it's just like an aerial dogfight going on above the.
So you need to deploy a condominium complex for swallows.
Right. So I had to go and build a second swallow box quickly and deploy that one. And I had takers within 1 minute. So I'd set up the second box, and within 1 minute, two swallows had landed on top and were just sort of, standing there, just waiting, all bringing in, ready to take on all takers, which I thought was funny. Awesome. So now clearly I need to build probably one more to handle any future visitors. But I love swallows. They're such a great bird.
Yeah. Our neighbors did something fascinating this year, and I want to find out what kind of birds they ended up with, because I can't see quite that far. They hung a bunch of old ceramic teapots, like the ones that you make the tea in, not the ones you put on the stove. Mm-hmm. And they hung them by the handles, and the little grate things that prevent the tea leaves from going out the spout are perfect apparently for building nests on. So they have these beautiful old ceramic teapots hanging in their tree, and it's just darling.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Things I want to figure out.
Yeah, I want to figure this out too. And I'm going to build a bat box. Which is kind of cool. I've got some leftover plywood from a project. And so you can, and it's like you put a bunch of slats just facing with the opening to the ground, towards the ground, and then they'll just come up and then just clutch on the inside of the slat, and apparently that's all they want. So I'll build those as well, because the more just biodiversity we can have around us, the better.
And I'm in favor of anything that eats mosquitoes.
Well, that's the thing, yeah. So this year to deal with the mosquitoes, I'm deploying an Air Force.
I completely approve of this. Yeah. Yesterday, we haven't put our window units into our windows yet, because it's hot, but not so hot to justify carrying things down from the attic. And I had the window wide open with no screen in it. And this one hummingbird kept going, I kind of want to come in your room.
I want to see what's going on in here. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have a row of succulents on my windowsill, and it just kept checking out the succulents and looking at me while I was on a telecon. So far, it hasn't actually come in the room, but I've decided I'm going to go get a hummingbird feeder, because it's clearly willing to get close to me. So I might as well feed it.
Hummingbirds are the honey badgers of the bird world. They are brutally territorial. They have zero fear. They're kind of amazing. So I'll stand by our hummingbird feeder, and the hummingbird will sort of come over and go and make maybe 6 inches from my face, checking me out, and then go and feed, and then come back over and check me out again, and then fly off. So. Yeah. This one wasn't getting quite that close. I was about 4 feet into my room. Yeah.
And Stella, who was super hot, was lying on a shelf right below the windowsill trying to catch the breeze. And so the hummingbird would get right up to the windowsill and look over the succulents at the dog and I, and then back away. But I think
do you have
entering
a feeder?
The house was where, not yet. I'm going to go get one.
Yeah. You get a feeder, but don't be surprised if you have to get multiple ones and get them and put them as far apart as you can around the house, because they are so territorial. It is just brutal aerial combat. One decides that this is their feeder, and then anyone who gets even too close, they just come in out of, they come in from the sun, and they just tear through. Yeah. It's kind of amazing how territorial and just nasty hummingbirds are. The
entire side of our house is planted with butterfly bush and flowering sage, which the hummingbirds absolutely love. And I can tell they're frustrated that the flowers aren't out yet, because one hummingbird, at least I assume it's the same hummingbird, will come and look at me through the basement window in an accusatory manner.
Yeah.
There's also a squirrel that does the same thing. It'll go against the window and look at me in an accusatory manner. Yeah. So they're clearly upset that the plants haven't finished growing on that side of the house. But So I figured this side of the house will feed a gazillion, and then I'll have the hummingbird feeder next to my office window.
Rich Wilson is saying, make sure that there's no praying mantises camping near the feeders. The big ones will gladly take down a hummingbird. We don't have praying mantises on Vancouver Island. So
we do.
I know you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, that's scary.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've seen praying mantises just sit on the screens, just grabbing grasshoppers that are hopping up the side of the house, because that's a thing here.
Yeah.
And yeah.
All right, we've wasted enough time. Let's move on to the actual job part of what we do.
Okay, I'm finding the record button, I believe. I think that's the thing we do now.
Mm-hmm.
I have pressed record.
I have also pressed record. Here we go. Astronomy Cast, episode 607, InSight and Mars Quakes. Welcome to Astronomy Cast, our weekly facts-based journey through the cosmos, where we help you understand not only what we know, but how we know what we know. I'm Fraser, Cain, publisher of Universe Today. With me, as always, is Dr. Pamela Gay, a senior scientist for the Planetary Science Institute and the director of CosmoQuest. Hey, Pamela, how you doing?
I am doing well. I have a sad, though. There's a solar eclipse next Wednesday, and we get none of it here.
Lunar eclipse.
None of it.
Lunar.
There's a lunar eclipse. There is a missing moon in the sky that should be full that occurs next Wednesday, and we don't get to see it. But
what do you mean we don't get to see it?
Okay, fine.
I get to see it. Yeah.
I has a sad.
I'll report on whether or not the moon disappeared and whether it came back.
Excellent. Yeah. Remember to slam those pots or whatever you do in Canada to get the eclipse to end.
Is that how that works?
I think so. That's what I've been told.
Huh. I've never done that, and I'm kind of amazed that the moon has returned every time. Then I didn't know that it was on me. So it's going to be an early morning one, and the way things work, I can watch this from my bed.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I can just lay in bed and watch the moon go through the entire thing until morning, and then get up for breakfast. Yeah, it's perfect.
And those of you in Australia and New Zealand, you are smack in the middle of it and get the best view of all. So all of you wonderful humans down under, go look at this for me. Mm-hmm. Go look at this for me.
Mars is cold and dead today, but the massive volcanoes tell us what the planet used to be like millions and even billions of years ago. But how volcanically active is the planet today? That's what NASA's Mars InSight lander is there to figure out. And we will talk about it more in a second, but first, let's have a break. And we're back. All right, Mars InSight, volcanoes. Is there active volcanism on Mars today?
Maybe. And this is such a new result. We picked this topic before the science result was published through peer review. And it's kind of awesome when randomness like that occurs. There is a new paper out with lead author David Horvath. And it discusses how in Serbius Foci, there appears to have been explosive volcanism as recently as within the last 50,000 years. 50,000.
Wow. That's soon. That's recent.
That counts as active volcanism today. And what's kind of awesome is that location matches up loosely with where InSight has seen some, seismic activity.
Okay, so then I guess the answer then is maybe. All right, so let's go back to the beginning here. Now, I don't know if we haven't done an episode on InSight in detail yet. Mm-hmm. I don't think. So can you just give like a brief overview of what Mars InSight is there to do?
So this is a fabulous little spacecraft that has proven that sometimes a world can defeat the most well-intentioned of spacecraft. InSight landed on Mars with two major missions. The first one was to put down a seismograph that would be able to detect faint earthquakes. And it's such a sensitive seismograph that it can see the waves of an earthquake if everything is perfect, not just propagate through the world once, but actually bounce through multiple times. And because of this, they can use a single seismograph to do the kind of science that we require multiple seismographs to do here on Earth, where things are a little bit more noisy because we have like trucks and mining and things like that.
I'm just kind of imagining this, that you're getting some earthquake happening somewhere on Mars, InSight detects it, and then it also detects the reverberations of that earthquake, Marsquake, as it bounces around the interior of Mars.
Yes.
Wow.
And this is only possible because Mars doesn't have oceans creating background noise, weather creating background noise, and all the activities of everything that is alive that create background noise. Now, it turns out that this has been harder than they thought because there's still wind on Mars. So one of my most amusing things to talk about when people are like, we need to send humans to Mars because sometimes we have to be able to fix things. Well, they realized the wind was creating problems for the seismograph because the wind was picking the cable and just creating slight vibrations in the cable between the seismograph and the spacecraft. So they're now using the shovel that's on an arm on the InSight to systematically bury the cable as though they were playing in a sandbox. And it's really delightful.
Oh, I had no idea. Okay. And so with InSight on the surface of Mars, with its really precise seismograph, how much activity has it detected?
Well, Mars is pretty boring. And they haven't been able to use the seismograph the entire time they're there because they have a second instrument, the mole. Didn't work so well. It was supposed to dig itself under the ground a few meters. It kind of determined that Mars dirt isn't packed the way it can dig through, but it tried a lot. And when you're hammering something into the ground, you can't detect earthquakes, Marsquakes, moonquakes, whatever kind of quake. If there's hammering going on, you can't sense them. So during the time the seismograph has been used, they've seen a background of quakes that are very similar to the kinds of quakes that we see on the moon from a world just basically settling out over time. But they've also caught twice last season and twice this season fairly significant earthquakes, greater than magnitude 3. You would have been able to feel them if you were there. Earthquakes during the northern summer. And these earthquakes seem to originate up around Elysium Plateau, which is near where Cerberus Fossae is located.
And so a site that seems to be some of the most recent volcanic activity on the surface of Mars. Yeah, I think I'd read that in the last year they detected something like 300 or maybe 500 quakes. So they're detecting a quake a day pretty much. And as you said, like magnitude 2, magnitude 3 at the most, 3 points, 2 or something at the most. So nothing that dangerous, nothing that's going to cause your Mars coffee to spill over.
And these quakes, they get divided in how they shake, rattle, and roll into two basic categories. Quakes that behave very, very much like moonquakes. And those are those background quakes that they see on a regular basis. And then there's those 2 last year, 2 this year, Earth-like quakes. And those are the ones that are really fascinating.
I'll bite. As a resident of the West Coast, I am familiar with the unsettling experience of being in a fairly significant earthquake. So,
right.
What is an Earth-like quake? How is that different from a moon-like quake?
So when we have Earth-like quakes, it's usually because there's some sort of tectonic activity. It doesn't have to be a moving plate. Iceland gets plenty of earthquakes due to the movement of magma beneath the surface. But essentially what you have is one chunk of planet decides it's going to bulge out or it's going to collapse down. And these motions within the rock can set waves moving through the surface and then through the core of the world.
Right.
Now, the other thing that you have going on, which we also see on the moon, is over time, planets in general are just settling like a house is settling. You see things compressing, you see them responding to the constant shake of background meteorites hitting. And this slow settling causes its own background of earthquakes. And there's nothing really exciting about this. Just basically you build anything, you set it down, and gravity will cause it to eventually settle into the most compact form it can be. And it takes time.
I sort of imagine like you've got a ball of aluminum foil and you crunch it up into a ball as tightly as you can, and then you give it to someone stronger than you, and they crunch it even tighter, and then you use some kind of tool, a hammer, to crunch it even tighter, and you just got this settling where the object's just getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
And it's also that effect of, I don't know if you've ever had a precarious pile of things. For me, this is usually dishes.
I believe I have some around me right now.
Yeah, and they seem to be more or less stable in a Jenga game kind of competitive manner. And all of a sudden, you see nothing obvious going on, and they're like, and now we're going to switch to a lower potential.
Right.
And things move. And this could be there was a breath of air. This could be that there was a tremble in the ground so small you didn't feel it. And that tiny change to the environment was enough to take something over the edge from static friction holding it in place to kinetic energy taking over.
All right, well, we're going to talk more about what we think the current activity of Mars is today, but it's time for another break. And we're back. So when we look at the huge volcanoes on Mars today, we've got Olympus Mons and the other three Mons. They're just absolutely enormous volcanoes, bigger than anything else that we know of in the solar system. The height is ludicrous. Clearly, an enormous amount of material was pouring out of these at one point. When do we think that they died?
So those massive, massive volcanoes that clearly look like volcanoes probably died billions of years ago, which is quite sad. But just like we have a variety of different kinds of volcanoes here on Earth, it turns out that Mars had a variety of different kinds of volcanoes there. When we look at the massive shield volcanoes, we can imagine pyroclastic flows going down their sides and everything just building up over time and ash getting shot into the, escape velocities with some of those volcanoes.
Yeah.
What we're looking at with Cerberus Fossae instead is more like the ground opened up and lava explosively came out of it. Sort of like what we're seeing happening in Iceland right now. And the ground cracked open and spit lava. This is explosive volcanism, and it leaves a very different kind of marking on the surface. In the images that are associated with most recent volcanoes identified, what you see is this odd, dark splotch on the ground, kind of like a pinched off oval. And it's that splotch that is the most recent lava that overlays all the other lava in the region and has so few craters that they appear young.
Mm-hmm. And so then to compare that sort of how that all looks to what we're seeing, these features in was it Cerberus fossae? Is that right? Cerberus fossae? Yeah.
Cerberus fossae, yeah.
What do those features look like as a comparison of what, as I said, we know are clearly ancient volcanoes, and now we see something that's more recent. What are we seeing?
Those are the explosive volcanoes. The ground cracked right here, oozed out a bit, and then stopped. It didn't bother to build mountains. It didn't bother to build enormous structures. There's just kind of a dark splat across the Mars.
Right. So what makes the scientists think that this is fresh-ish?
So we get at the age of things on Mars by looking at how they're layered on top of each other. So you have, for instance, a field of non-duny surface. So you're seeing old surface, and it's covered in craters. Mm-hmm. The more craters you have, the longer that ground has been there, exposed to space, waiting for things to crater it.
Right.
Overlaying on top of this ancient surface, we periodically see things like water features, canyons, valleys, stream beds, ponding, shores, tsunami lines. All of these things are on Mars. We also see layered on top of things volcanic activity, the tongues of lava that cut across the world. So by looking at how you have this underlying maximum number of craters terrain, layered on top of that, you have various tongues of lava, streams of material, and craters are through all of this. The places that have the smallest number of craters are the youngest. Mm. So when we look at sand dunes that are still sweeping across the world, changing from season to season, those areas have almost no craters at all. Sometimes they have no craters for the smaller sand dunes. That's a young place. In this case, we have lava that is emplaced over other lava, has negligible numbers of craters, and everything lines up between what is the age of the material it's on top of, how much stuff does it have trying to be on top of it. It seems to point to it being just 50,000 years or less.
And so if you could have been there whenever it happened, what would you see? I'm sort of familiar with different versions of volcanoes. I sort of think about what you see in Hawaii with Kilauea, with the big blobs of lava pouring down the landscape. I think of things like Mount St. Helens, which are more explosive.
Yeah, nothing that exciting. So this would have been the ongoing volcano currently erupting near Reykjavik. I am not going to attempt to pronounce the volcano's name. I'm sorry, humans.
Something yokel. Fuck yokel.
I don't hear the sounds well enough to try and make the sounds, and I will admit to that. There's an ongoing eruption near Reykjavik where basically a section of ground started spewing lava out of it, and it's slowly building up hills. It's filling up a valley, but it's never going to become a mountain unless it lasts for longer than anyone can imagine. Similarly, a few years ago on the big island of Hawaii, the volcano there decided it wasn't going to erupt out of its crater for a while, and instead decided to eat a subdivision. And those cracks in the ground that spewed lava and ate people's backyards and homes, that kind of a cracking open lava explosively coming out of the ground, that again is more the kind of activity that we're looking for. Right.
And so I'm just sort of like how close could you get and be safe, do you think? Like, would you want to be kilometers away from it? Would you want to be a few hundred meters away from it? Would be spraying material? And I wonder how it would be behaving. Sorry, I got a million questions, but.
Right. So I respect your million questions, and I love volcanoes.
I know.
And
I think that you were one geology class away from becoming a geologist and not an astronomer.
Well, I never took a geology class ever.
That's what I'm right. So if you had taken a geology class early on when you were doing your science degree, you could very well have become a volcanologist. I'm just putting that out there.
So I think that just like I love biology and animal science, but I recognize that I'm sufficiently dyslexic that I shouldn't try to take that many chemistry courses.
Right.
I suspect that there is enough mineralogy and volcanism that I would have fled. But this is a lesson to all of you. You can be learning disabled and still get a PhD in science. Just know your limits.
Yeah. Wait. Okay. You know what? Now I'm going to need to take a break. And then we'll pick this up in a couple of seconds. All right. And we're back. So I guess where this is all coming to is just like how active. If it was 50,000 years ago, that's fresh. That's now, essentially.
Right.
So could there be another eruption on the surface of Mars any day now? Almost inevitably.
Well, probably not any day now, because the earthquakes would have been much more interesting if something was about to blow. Mm-hmm. But could there be conceivably another event? I'm going to go with, I'm not going to say no to that. And where I took pause in trying to answer all your questions is I honestly don't know how the significantly lower gravity and less atmospheric pressure is going to change the safety radius around a volcano. It's going to be a whole lot easier for any volcanoes on Mars to fling things in your direction. So maybe give them a little more space than you'd give the same kind of volcano here on Earth. But this wasn't a destroys an entire island like Krakatoa kind of event. Mm-hmm. And it's the kind of thing where I can imagine being a couple of mons away, looking across the valley and seeing it off in the distance, completely safe, and edging your way forward with all of your detectors trying to figure out what are the limitations on this new world.
Well, just remember, in the 1/3 gravity, any blocks and boulders thrown into the air will travel triple the distance. So
this is why you start out a couple mountains away.
Yeah, start far away and see what happens. And so if there was some ongoing or future activity, what do you think InSight would detect? What would it look like?
What has me so excited is it's not just InSight that could potentially be detecting things. So InSight, if there was suddenly going to be a pressure release in the form of magma oozing forth, you'd see building up earthquakes as essentially the pressure builds and builds and builds, just like we see in Iceland and in other places. But in addition to that, you'd see outgassing. And what fascinates me about this, and I haven't been able to find a paper discussing this new enough to take in InSight and Horvath's work, we have in the past detected methane during the summer months on Mars. The two pairs of earthquakes that have been observed in the summer. And this is consistent with what we see on Earth, where when you release the added pressure of having things frozen, it liberates things to erupt. Mm-hmm. And so we're seeing the summertime release of methane, the summertime quakes, which point to geologic activity that I had been so hopeful was biologic activity in the past. So now we have even more questions.
Okay.
We have even more questions. So now we need to do more work to figure out, does MAVEN, do these gas detectors detect gas tied to the seismology?
Yeah.
So do you see more methane when you see more earthquakes? Or is it different parts of Mars? And these are the things that we now need to start figuring out. The universe loves yes and. The universe is all
right.
about improv.
Right.
So
Yeah, so I'm just sort of imagining this idea that you've got this volcanic activity that's pinpointed roughly by InSight, and that gives you that tells you that some kind of volcanic outgassing probably happened in that region, and so then you try to target Trace or some other spacecraft that's watching the atmosphere to see if you see a buildup of methane in that region, and if you do, sorry, life.
Well, so this is where the yes and is so important. Is I think we need to, one, be paying attention to those northern lowlands where Lucium Planitia and Cerberus Fossae are located, this vast area that's thought to perhaps be a crater. We need to be paying attention to it to see what methane is there. But then we also need to do controls. Go look at the highlands somewhere. Mm-hmm. Go look someplace absolutely still and see what is its methane over time. There's a lot to understand. And all because there's geologic methane doesn't mean there isn't also biologic methane.
Right. Which is exciting, but also kind of frustrating because we sort of imagine it's going to be one thing or the other, and that our science will tell us whether it goes one way or the other. But the inevitable possibility is that it's a delightful blend of all of them. And as you say, yes, and. So is it volcanic activity? Yes. But is it also biological activity? Maybe. Yes. We still can't rule it out. So
yeah. I want to say yes. I have no reason to say yes. I want to say yes.
Of course. But I love that the answer is always more complicated than you thought. And
the universe is more creative than we are.
Yeah. And so we're always what we go in with these really simplistic ideas, and what we walk out with is complicated questions. Right. And then we try to get the answers to those, and it turns out that those are complicated questions and so on. That we're never finding answers, we're just finding better questions. And I think that's science.
It's a wonderful path forward. And we're just going to have to yes and our equations too.
Right. Thanks, Pamela.
Thank you.
All right. Do you have some names for us this week?
I do. I just need to switch windows using the correct mouse. I'm sorry I always give you this editing.
Should I remind you before we begin to get ready?
Well, so I opened it up. I just then covered it up, and now my screensaver has come on the computer that I opened it up on. Okay, here we go. I have found all the things humans. All right. So as always, we are here thanks to the generous contributions of people like you. You allow us to pay the cat herders and make sure they have medical benefits. And without Nancy, Beth, Allie, Rich, all those humans behind us, we would not be here for you. So thank you. And this week in particular, I want to thank Ravening, Alan Price, Merrick Verdarni, Mark Von Knappe, Ben Floss, Elad Avron, Philip Walker, Matt Rucker, Joshua Adams, Nate Detweiler, David, Gregory Singleton, Karthnik Vekatraman, Chris Schauerhofer, Vocal Warrior 24, Cooper, GeForce 184, Sarah Turnbull, Scott Beaver, Don Mundis, Paul D. Disney, Matt Newbold, Jen Grunwald, Dave Lackey, Lee Zealand. I'm going to need reading glasses. There's so many of you.
This is the best.
Dean McDaniel, Father Prax, Andrew Stephenson, Kenneth Ryan, Stephen Shewater, Bart Flaherty, Andesor, Rachel Fry, Smansky, Tim McMacken, Matthias Hayden, Glenn McDavid, Planetar, Anthony Burgess, Shannon Humber, and the Air Major. Thank you all. Thanks all of you for everything you do.
Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
And then they saved. 6:07.
Yep. I said that far too loud. Sorry.
Don't yell at me.
I'd forgotten I turned my face towards my microphone. It hurt me too.
It didn't sound any different to me.
Okay. My monitor was like, you just yelled into your mic, stupid. my monitor had opinions.
Yeah, your monitor's mean.
It is. It is.
Okay. Saved. And do you want to know a secret?
Mm-hmm.
I upload now immediately.
I do too. I just save directly to Dropbox.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, right. So you're saving right to Dropbox the whole time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, it doesn't write to Dropbox. It writes to some cache somewhere, and then when I'm done, it saves it to Dropbox.
Okay. I'm uploading. Yeah, because back in the day, remember we used to like not upload because it was messing up our speed, and I don't know whether Dropbox figured out how to manage bandwidth
compression
better.
has gotten better, and
Yeah.
also I suspect our internet bandwidths are not what they were 15 years ago.
That's possibly true. Yeah. At this point, I have, very, very fast internet, but I don't know.
We're upgrading to 30 up, and like we've never had that much up before. We have it feels like infinite down, but up is hard to get.
Yeah. I think, I don't know where I'm at right now. Let me see. Let's see what impact this has on my go speed test. I think I'm in the sort of the 30 range up.
Yeah, we're like high teens, but we're upgrading next week to 30. So that will be exciting. And we inevitably have multiple people doing telecons at once in this house. Mm-hmm. So
yeah. 100
up.
Yeah. There you go.
Are you on fiber?
No, I don't think so. I'm on cable.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, we have in theory it's gigabit down, but it ends up being about 800 down, and then it's about 100 up. I mean, I go for as much internet as they will sell me.
Yeah.
They're like, good news, Fraser. We've upgraded your neighborhood. Like, yes, please. Internet, please. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, as I mention this all the time, my dad, one island away from us, gets 5 down and 1 up. So is that the Starlink? No, that's not the Starlink. That is my wired connection. But we're going camping again this weekend. So, but we don't have any power. So we take the Starlink, and then the only way we can use the Starlink is that I have to turn on the truck. And then the truck is running. It's got a little inverter built into it, and then we run Starlink, and so we can quickly, you
need to get one of those telescope battery packs.
Well, I've done the math. I've been trying to figure this out, and it would gobble up one of those in a heartbeat. So
really?
Yeah, it runs 100 watts constantly. So
okay.
Like a light bulb, which is actually not a lot of power, but if you want to run 100 watts for a day, then you're looking at there are some that do this, but they're big battery packs that cost about $1,000 or $1,500, and so I can't do it. So I'm just gonna and last weekend that we did it, we didn't need any internet. We just got by with what we could get with our phone. Carla didn't even bring her computer. So, mostly awesome. We just spend our time looking out into the forest. That's our internet.
I get that. I get that.
Yeah. There you go. And I'm all uploaded. Okay. So hit us with your questions. Hal McKinney asks, how do we know what the makeup and depth of each distinct layer of the different planets are?
So we don't know exactly what they are. We know the densities from earthquakes, and we speculate that the solar system started out with a fairly homogeneous cloud of stuff and things. And as that nebula collapsed down, flattened, and got blasted with sunlight, the combination of forces distributed the material so that you ended up with a gradient in isotopes as you move outward. And we see this gradient reflected in different meteorites that we get that we know come from different places. So based on what we know about what was available to make the worlds, based on what we know about what things have what densities, and data we get from like neutron detectors that see particles getting scattered out of the surface of a world, putting all this data together, we're able to loosely say this is consistent with the following layers within a world. So these kinds of techniques are now allowing us to start to find like buried glaciers on Mars. It's really kind of awesome.
That's amazing. Arjone asks, even though there is no plate tectonics or rain, can Olympus Mons still crumble?
I think crumble might be kind of the wrong word because that implies big chunks. Wind is constantly wearing away at it. There is always the potential for landslides on Mars that are driven in part by the rain, not the rain, the wind. But in terms of like, there is a gorgeous arch off the coast of the Galapagos that crumbled this week.
Yeah, I saw that.
And those kinds of things fall into big chunks, require processes that drive the creation of cracks. And you can create cracks that create boulders with massive temperature changes. Asteroids have this occur. You can create it by having freeze thaw of water. But these kinds of processes that get in there and expand and contract the rock, there's just not a lot driving that on Mars right now.
I wonder, is the regolith on Mars, like we know the regolith on the moon is the pulverized fragments from billions of years of impacts.
Right.
How much of the regolith on Mars is that? And how much of it is just like traditional weathering?
So I don't think we're in a position right now to figure out exactly what the breakdown is, because we know that the sands of Mars were in part generated in the past by water, are generated today by wind events. There's active dunes, there's dust devils. And we know that you do have the steady stream of stuff falling out of space, breaking when it lands on. And so you have these multiple factors all created dust in differing amounts at different points in Mars history. And what today is left over from what process then, I wouldn't trust results on that right now.
Right.
Not until we know more about the water.
Hal McKinney asks, how can I get my device autonomous family to all sit in the living room at the same time? Oh,
I can't help you with that one.
I'm a parent. I'm now at the other side of that whole situation. There's nothing you can do. It's hopeless. If you introduce them to devices, it's your fault. It's my fault. They should have never known that technology existed. We could have just been churning butter and tilling the fields and just lived in some kind of agrarian society, and they never would have gotten access to the internet and television and Xbox, and we would just be sitting around the gramophone singing sea shanties like a family should, as opposed to this separate bubble living that we have today.
So I have to admit, I remember my grandpa pulling out his accordion and people singing, and I'm kind of okay that there's less accordion in the world. But
wait, no, because I mean, then you have less Weird Al Yankovic. So
I'm good with maximizing Weird Al Yankovic,
as long as the accordion play is concentrated in Weird Al Yankovic. Fine.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And so there is a lot to be said about hanging around and singing and talking and things like that. But like, go out and play virtual world games that take you into the real world as well. There's a lot of different ones out there. Pokemon Go is probably the most famous right now. So play games together. If you don't want to go outside and actually move, I totally understand that. There's so many games online you can do together. I know a bunch of people who play Minecraft with their kids and build entire worlds and civilizations. There's a lot of cooperative games out there that you can play. Don't Starve Together is one I've seen a lot of people playing with their kids. So embrace the new reality we're in, because it means that when you all live in different houses someday, you'll still be connected through the internet, and you'll know how to be connected through the internet.
I'm looking forward to the kinds of technologies that will allow us to act as if we are in the same room. There's some interesting, because we are getting far flung.
Google hologram thing?
Yeah.
That's
like we are getting
wild.
far flung around the world.
Yeah.
And so, some of my favorite family members are on the other side of the continent. And yet I would love to be able to just hang out with them in person, as it were. Having a cup of coffee on the other side of a virtual table, just chilling, would be great.
I just miss the ability to throw couch cushions at people who do something ludicrous while playing board games. Because there's times that you just want to throw a couch cushion at somebody.
Yeah. And but apart from that, I have no answer for you, man. It's rough. Like, like you can try to like, hey, let's have a big sit down dinner. Let's make dinner, and then kids just shuffle in, grab food, rush off to their screens. Yeah.
Fires work to attract humans.
Sure. Yeah.
So we barbecued last Friday.
Right.
And fire.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Yeah. Everybody loves a little campfire. But yeah, no, it is interesting. I mean, I think that we all go through this phase where we find social media interesting and interaction with other people in these online spaces interesting. And then after a while, we realize some of us are more active on these things than others. But we find that it's really hard. It doesn't give you a lot of long-term meaningful happiness. If anything, it gives you a little bit of sadness, and you have to start to replace the quick dopamine hits with something that's a little more meaningful, like separating battling swallows. To
return to where we started.
Exactly.
And I have to say, I have formed extremely meaningful friendships over the internet, but it's because these are people who have taken the time to get to know the same way I would talk to my friends on the phone and think, well, I don't talk to anyone on the phone anymore. Talk to people through the software of the moment. And the key is we all find spaces to just talk. And so going and simply being a participant on Reddit, going and simply tumbling things on Tumblr. I don't know if that's the right verb. I'm showing my age. That isn't building community. But sometimes hanging around in a video channel on a Discord, seeing each other knitting and playing each other's games and seeing each other's faces and dogs, that you can build relationships through.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that for me, like, if I'm not feeling like I'm putting in effort, then that is my guide that it's probably not meaningful. It's not a meaningful relationship building activity. And so I have to up my game. I have to say, hey, Logan, let's go. There's a bunch of seals out on the dock that I've heard. Let's go check them out, right? And so you have to, and then you go and you drive down and you go check it out and you grab some ice cream and you hang out and watch the seals, and it's fun and you have a meaningful experience. And you can't just throw a little heart on his picture of something that he built in Minecraft, right? And so that's all.
Yeah, no, it has to be a two-way dialogue.
Yeah, it just has to be that you're putting in that relationship building requires you putting in energy, and that that you're on the right track when you are feeling like you're putting in work
Yeah.
to make a meaningful impact in other people's lives, and then you let that be your guide. But definitely in this world of where everybody else is just dripping with dopamine just with their wires, with their joy wire, jacked into the net, and you're like wandering around going, anybody want to do charades? That's a rough, you've got an uphill battle on your hands. You just got to bring your A game.
Yeah.
Anybody want to help me separate battling swallows? Yeah. It's but making light of it. But I think humanity is experiencing kind of an existential transition to a new reality, and we, each one of us, will have to go through this journey of getting tempted onto the happy trail of online outrage and simple dopamine reaction till we come back to deep and more meaningful interactions.
And I think so. As an observational astronomer in graduate school, I was physically isolated from everyone so much of the time because I was out on the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also isolated in time from a lot of people. But the same time that I was out there observing was when things like instant messenger were coming into existence. And so I got to maintain relationships that otherwise would have fallen apart because I was observing too much, because I could constantly text with people
mm-hmm.
and then see them face to face. And today I find that I'm able to live in a multinational community because I hang out with people on the internets, but I find time to talk to small groups. I find time to have those one-on-one phone calls and FaceTimes and Zooms, or pick a tech I haven't
mm-hmm.
installed probably. I hate WebEx. And this is going to someday allow us to stop having massive cities in the same way
mm-hmm.
that we have them today, which I think will increase the standard of living for more people while allowing connectivity between more people.
I'm so grateful at the relationships, at the friendships that I've been able to make online with you, with Phil, with all these people.
Yeah.
I'm even more grateful that I've had the occasional chance to hang out with people in person. But it's like this pale shadow of what, if you could take all the people who you've met online that you like the best, and you could relocate them all to some some cool eco co-op where you all got to
mm-hmm.
hang out all the time and brew your own beer and have barbecues and chill out. That would be
tiny houses around a yurt to play board
exactly
games.
That would be
the dream. This is my dream.
Yeah, exactly. That would be the dream, because you've used the internet to find all of your favorite people.
Yeah.
And then you have a way to be able to have a nice, close relationship with all of those people. And I think that's the dream. And I think hopefully technology will sort that out and make it come full circle, because I think the way we interact online is a pale shadow of the way we used to interact with just regular people. But we get a glimpse because we get to have a pale interaction with the most amazing people, which is so like some of my favorite people are in South America, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, Malaysia, right? And I'm just like,
but we get to do things like Aviva Yamani, who's the project director for 365 Days of Astronomy. She and I are giving a workshop at a conference next week that is fully online because COVID times.
mm-hmm.
There are attendees from 84 different nations. And the planning committee meetings that I've been on have been like 10, 15 people, all from different countries. And this ability to figure out how to do this, and Aviva and I are in the background, separated exactly 12 hours. My 9 a.m. is her 9 p.m. and reverse. And I hate time zones. They are not my friend. And it's always a challenge figuring out, okay, when is who awake?
Mm-hmm.
But then to have this ability to talk to each other, to see each other, to, hey, what's that book behind you? Oh, what's your dog doing?
Yeah.
It's
maybe we
yeah.
like move all of humanity into just a bunch of 10-kilometer tall ecologies so that everybody's within, one city that contains 7 billion inhabitants. And then the rest of the planet is a nice wilderness that we can explore, but let it return to its
I'd be
pristine
okay with
nature.
that.
Yeah, I would too, actually. I like cities. All right, we've reached the end of our hour. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this week. Pamela, what cool thing have you got that you're working on?
That conference I just mentioned is
Mm-hmm.
entirely free. Communicating Astronomy to the Public, taking place next week in Hopin, which is one of the better virtual conference platforms I've seen so far. And besides that, we're just going to keep putting out our daily space episodes. Last Friday, we interviewed an astronaut. That video is up. Katie
Fantastic.
Coleman. She's just a delightful human. So go check it out. Daily Space on the CosmoQuest YouTube page.
Awesome. I'm just writing my newsletter, my Friday newsletter. So if you haven't already, go to universetoday.com/newsletter. You can get the latest episode that will head out probably in about 2 hours from now. So
Perfect.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see all of you next week.
Bye-bye, everyone.
End the stream.